Hello everyone and welcome back. In the last few videos, we explored a lot in Solidity, but just the basics. So we started with Hello World, then we saw how we can write into Hello World, how variables are declared in Solidity, how do functions work, how do getter setter functions work, and now we want to look through arrays. So if you're familiar with any kind of language, programming language, you must be always using arrays. So arrays are nothing but it's a property that helps you to save some kind of data, an array of data, not just a single data but number of data you can save together, right? So let's just dive into how we want to declare and use different kinds of arrays in the Solidity. So we start as it is with Pragma Solidity and the versioning. Then we write the contract and name it as arrays. Then we have three types of arrays. So the first one is a fixed size array, means that when you declare uint of 5 means the size of the array fixed size, that fixed size array is 5 and it's declared for you and its initial values would always be 0. So the values won't change. Next, we have a dynamic sized array. The dynamic sized array is dynamic, as the word suggests itself, that it's dynamic and its value or the size is varying and it's not defined at the time of declaration. So as you can already see that in square brackets there is nothing written in that, right? Next is a multi-dimensional arrays. So if you know much about matrices, matrices are also a type of multi-dimension arrays where there are a number of rows and number of columns, right? So here I have a multi-dimensional array of 2 and the second dimension is not defined, because whenever you want to define a multi-dimensional array, you just need the first one and not the last one. Then you have a function that is called get fixed dynamic array length. So what does that do is that the previous array that we declared, that was a multi-dimension, a fixed and dynamic size array, we want the length of it, right? So this is a function that helps you to get the length of a fixed dynamic array. Next is we want to print a whole array. So when we covered getter and setter functions, we make sure that getter functions were used whenever we want to get some value, we want to print out some value. So same we are going to use here is we want to use this getter function to get or to print the value of a whole array. So how do we do that is we write down function, the name of the function, view, then public, and what kind of thing it returns. So it returns a uint of 5, an array of size 5, memory, in memory, right? And it returns an array fixed size. So it returns in the fixed size array. Then we have a function that says get dynamic all, means it gets the whole dynamic function. It gets the whole dynamic array that we have declared earlier, right? So before going ahead, let's go ahead and just compile this so that we can just understand it much better. We'll compile and deploy the contract and it's done. Yeah, here. So what was the first thing? The first thing was we declared a fixed size array, right? So let's just get the fixed array first. Here you can see its size is 5 and all the values are initialized to zeros, right? Next we have a dynamic array, right? So let's just get the dynamic array as well. So it's not defined, it does not have a defined value, so what size it is, and it does not have initialized values as well, right? Next is get fixed array function. So get fixed array function that we have already seen here. So we got the fixed array and the dynamic array as well. So these two functions are covered. Let's get ahead with the code now. So writing into dynamic array. So till now we know how we can declare an array, then we know how we can get the values of an array. Now it's time to know how we can write into a dynamic array. So we can only write into a dynamic array because its size is not defined. We have not defined the size of a dynamic array, hence we can extend or shorten the size of the dynamic array, right, depending upon our needs. So how do we write it? So first, see, the size is initially 0. Dynamic array does not have a size. It's initially 0, right? So if we want to add something in, we want to increase its length, right? So first line first is that we take the array dynamic size dot length plus plus, means we have increased the length, the size of the dynamic array. Next is that we use array dynamic size and then the address of where we want to add that. So we want initially the length would be 1, then 1 minus 1 would be 0. So on the 0th location we want to write down 111, right? So let's just go ahead and call this function now. So here is this, yeah. So here's the function that is used to increase the length of the dynamic length. So right, we were at the function where we were increasing the dynamic length of the dynamic array, right? So let's just click on increase dynamic length and it's called, and now just click on get dynamic array. So we see that 111 is here already, right? So on the location 0, 111 has been printed, that it has been written, right? So next the function is to get the dynamic array. So we already used this to get the dynamic array function to get the values, to print the value of the dynamic array which has changed upon the previous function execution, right? Next, the last function is to increase the fixed dynamic length. So now we want to increase or write into a fixed dynamic array. So the first kind is fixed while the next is dynamic. So it's a fixed dynamic array, right? As we saw in the starting, here it is, here we defined it, fixed dynamic array, right? So it's a multi-dimensional array. So as it is, the first step first is to increase the length. We want to increase the length of the array and then we want to write some value at some specific position and that value is 1, 2, 3, right? So as this is a multi-dimensional array, it is defined like this whenever we want to write some value. So the first array, first row and the column as well. The 0th row and 0th column you want to write 1, 2 and 3 there. So now let me just go ahead and click on increase fixed dynamic length. So here is increased fixed dynamic length. Let me click here and then let me get the values of dynamic. So fixed dynamic is here. So the length is 3, 2 and this is here. So why this is 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 3, 4 so many multiple times? Because I've clicked this multiple times. So I've increased the fixed dynamic length multiple times. So whenever I click on the increased fixed dynamic length and then I get dynamic values, it has increased to by 1. So on the 0th position it writes 1, 2, 3. On the first position it writes 2, 3, 4. Right? So I hope this all the code is clear to you, and if you have any doubts, do reach out to us on the GitHub or on the Twitter handle. You can just drop in some queries in the comments as well and we'll try to reach out to you. And till then, stay with us. Thank you so much for joining in and keep learning.